Brighton Legion. I'd like to thank them for hosting this event. The Brighton-Cramahe Chamber are the sponsors of this event. And I thank you for this nice turnout. I'm Don Parks, the past president of the Chamber, and I'm going to be your moderator. And I'm trying to think about the appropriate word for it. The person who tries to control everything from here. Essentially, how we're going to set it up is the speaker that I have in my hand will be the speaker that you will use to ask a question. If you have a question, I would like you to line up along here. Don't stand too close to that speaker, though. Is everyone able to hear me okay? At the back? Somebody wave their hand, say yes.
Louder.
Thank you. So, if any of you have a question right now, if you'd like to start lining up, I'm going to ask the candidates to introduce themselves in the order that we selected them. This evening we have Lou Rinaldi, we have Rob Milligan, we have Gudrun Ludorf-Weaver, and we have Russ Christensen, thank you.
I'm not Kira.
And just for the record, Russ is not the candidate, but he is here to speak on behalf of the NDP. He will address any questions that are policy issues, but will not obviously be able to address any questions that you may ask, will you do this as our candidate? Because she will not be, or he will not be the candidate, okay? Some housekeeping. I do want to have control of this. I do not want to have somebody come up and think they have a soapbox and they can criticize, jump on, or complain about anything. Ask a question, please. You can direct it individually at one of the candidates, or you can ask a general question and expect all of them to answer. Each candidate will have an opportunity to answer any question. Clear? I was trying to think of a way to use the words respect and dignity. These people are volunteers. They volunteer to run and try to become a member of Parliament and do the best thing for you. So please respect them for that effort. Don't abuse them tonight. Let's find some. Okay? But let's start with allowing them to tell us a little bit. I'm going to give each of them 3 minutes. I have my partner in crime up here at the front is going to show a sign. One is 15, one is 1 minute. If they don't react to it, then I get nasty and stop them from speaking. Okay? Is that clear, guys? That is clear. And let's start then. Lou Rinaldi, you have 3 minutes. The mic is right there.
Maybe I should stand. Maybe I should stand up so people can see. Is this on? Did I break it already?
Let's try. Do it back again. I'll tell you what, Lou.
Why don't I use that one? Okay, how's that? Well, first of all, it's nice to be home, and I'll have a shorter drive home than last night. It was about an hour by the time I get home, but it was worthwhile. It was worthwhile. We had an agricultural debate last night. So we do have an election 2 weeks today. I think at this time, next 2 Thursdays from now, we'll be wondering who's going to be the next MP here in Northumberland Committee West. And instead of telling you who I am and where I've been, I just want to get right into the meat of things. And this debate, this election, and I think we all agree, that it's probably one of the most important elections that we've had, at least that I'm a member of. And one of the reasons is that the parties, the 3 major parties, have really distinct policies that's going to impact not just our life for the next whatever term. If it's a minority government, it could be a short term. If it's a majority government, it could be 4 years. But it'll have an impact for a long, long time. So I say to you that come June the 12th, I think that decision that you'll be making, please base it on the actual policies that each party has. And specifically between the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party. And the difference is that in our side, the Liberal side, we have a plan to create jobs, to keep an education system strong, to keep a healthcare strong and vibrant, and have seniors live with dignity. We look at the other side, and it's slash and burn. I mean, and I'm not making those words up. I think the leader of the official opposition has made that very, very clear. And my colleague to my left has made it very, very clear in the other debates that that's their vision of Ontario down the road. They don't believe in helping companies expand or establish in this province. Just this morning, I had the pleasure of visiting Metro Paper in Trenton. 3.5 years ago, they got some provincial help to establish a brand new plant in Quinte West. I was delighted when they started, 25 people. I was there today. They have 75 people and 5 lines. When they first started, it was 1 line. So one could call that corporate welfare. I call it giving a hand up to create jobs in the province of Ontario. We have a 25-year plan to do that. And you see the 15 seconds, so I'm done. Rob, I'm not sure.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Rob Milligan. I'm the former MPP the last 2.5 years for Northumberland West, and I grew up in Warkworth, and my wife and I live just outside of Warkworth on a farm. We were raising beef cattle. Now, because of the 11 election, we dispatched the cattle, and we just cash crop now. I did teach for 13 years at the high school in Campbellford, and one of the reasons that I decided to put my name forward, quite frankly, was because of the education policies under Mr. McGuinty. I thought that the Liberal policies of the day were doing a great disservice for the young people of this province in not preparing them for the global economy of the 21st century. So that's why I threw my hat in the ring, and that's why I'm seeking re-election again. For numerous reasons. First and foremost, you've heard, and this will probably be the only time Mr. Rinaldi, Lou and I agree, is that there are completely 2 different paths presented to the voters of the province of Ontario come June 12th. The path that we're currently on, which is a path that I believe, in my heart, is going to lead this province to bankruptcy. And we have a plan, a vision that will, yes, we have to make some tough decisions, and Lou alluded to the fact that our plan does call for 100,000 public sector jobs to be cut over the next 4 years. However, you have to realize that there's the rest of the story. There's 1.2 million public sector workers in the province of Ontario currently. And there's usually a 4 to 6% attrition rate, okay? So over the course of 4 years, there's actually going to be 220,000, approximately, public sector workers retiring. So what we're saying is, yes, we are probably going to hire 120,000 to replace the 220, but we are not going to keep feeding this bloated bureaucracy that is bankrupting the province of Ontario. Currently, it has taken the province, before Mr. McGuinty came to power, 23 premiers, 140 plus years to amass $130 billion worth of debt. In 11 years that Mr. McGuinty and Premier Wynne have been in power, they have more than doubled that to $290 billion. So for every 2 hours that passes, that's every hour, there's $2 million that goes into interest payments alone. That's $33,000 a minute. So almost $100,000 since I've been speaking. We cannot hire nurses or ECEs. There's your nurse, there's your ECE right there.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. It's great to see everyone out. This really makes it worth our while to have you and have an audience and people who are thinkers and people who want to find out what actually is going on. So I just wanted to start off by saying, do you want to know what I do for relaxation?
All candidates meetings?
No, I love to watch those TV shows that show you how the house looked before, and then the crew goes in and switches it all up and makes it just gorgeous. The sort of transformational shows like Love and or Listed, and you know the ones I'm talking about, Mike Holmes, really inspiring, and it is relaxing. So there are different views of what transformation should look like for our province. The PCs want to slash and cut, and they seriously believe, just as Mike Harris believed, that cutting services is justified because it will eventually balance the books. But that is not wise, because what happens is you are cutting jobs, you are losing momentum, and people become disenfranchised. And you expand the divide between the haves and the have-nots. The Liberals are, dare I say, on the very opposite end. They want to spend, but they want to spend what they want to spend, not necessarily what you want to spend. So what happens? Well, you know what happens. We're in the hole for billions of dollars, and we have nothing to show for it. So, the NDP have good ideas on paper, but the party seems to flip-flop, like the Durban 2 conference, or Dix's flip-flop on the pipelines, or horse racing debacle in Manitoba, or Mulcair on the line 9B. So, the Greens, the Transformers, we won't slash and cut, but conserve. We won't spend without talking to you first. And we say what we mean, and we stick to it. We want to bring honesty, integrity, and good public policy back to Queen's Park. Thanks.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm here on behalf of Kira Meese. Kira grew up in Hastings, which is not too far from here. She went to University of Dalhousie, and then she came back here to raise her family. And Bob Crate, who was a municipal councillor in Campbellford, is her father. I hear Lou talk about slash and burn and how the Conservatives slash and burn. That may be true. But the Liberals, they just burn. They're burning our money. And they're doing it without any accountability. And I don't know about you, but I'm really angry about that. I'm not happy about the way they've been going through the money. I'm not happy about the scandals, the Liberal scandals. Kathleen Wynne's trying to say she wasn't there for that. She was there. She was at the cabinet table. So what about responsibility? And I like what Gunda said about the honesty and integrity, bringing that to politics. That is absolutely the reason that I ever got involved in politics. I can remember my parents. I grew up in Alberta. I can remember my parents saying, wouldn't it be nice if some honest people ran for politics? Well, there are some. There actually are some honest people running. And I think that's something you should consider when you're voting. Now, it really is time for change. We've had 20 years of Conservative and then Liberal governments in Ontario, and we're in a big mess. We've got high youth unemployment. More and more young people have to move back home because they can't afford their own place. Their lives are on delay or on hold. We have pensioners who don't have enough money to live in dignity. We have long-term care homes that are bursting at the seams, that don't have enough room for new people. How is any of this acceptable? In the meantime, there is a lot of money out there, but it's all flowing to the top 1% or 0.01% for that matter. And this mythology of Mr. Hudak that, he can't even add up the numbers. He's got an economics degree, but he can't add up the numbers. 1 million jobs, it's nowhere near 1 million jobs. 75,000 is the most recent estimate I've seen. So who are you going to believe about that sort of thing? One of the things I like about what the NDP is doing in this particular campaign provincially, very practical, doable promises, things that can be kept as promises. And I know Bob Rae's government, lots of people like to slag the Bob Rae government from 20 years ago, but I just want to remind you that that was a very deep recession that we were in back then. Also, every provincial NDP government has been the most fiscally responsible government that Canadians have ever had, including all the federal governments. They are always balancing the budgets, and that's something to keep in mind. And that's one of the things that Andrea Horvath and the NDP want to do here in Ontario, and we're completely capable of doing it. Absolutely. We do know how to add and subtract.
Are you ready for questions?
We're ready.
We'll ask you to come to the mic and give your question.
Good evening, folks. My name is Roger McMurray, and I'd like to provide a little bit of background. I want to ask the candidates a question on the Murray Canal Bridge. As you know, it's become a big controversy. It's become a big controversy. In any case, Murray Canal Bridge. The municipality seem to be caught in a quagmire of bureaucracies. On the one hand, we have Parks Canada, who owns the bridge. We have Quinte West, who maintains and owns that area. We have Brighton to the south, we have Brighton to the north. And the only people that it's going to get hurt if the bridge is not, provided the 2 lanes that it really needs, are the people of Brighton. Because no one's going to come down County Road 30 when they know that County Road 40 is pure access.
64.
County Road 64. County Road 64, yeah. 30 is coming off the other way. In any case, County Road 64 that runs past Loose Racetrack is going to be a choke, a real choke. And the question is, if you are elected, do you have any plans to help out the municipalities? They're broke. Parks Canada seems to be broke too, and they're the ones that make money, the federal government, But we really need a leg up on this bridge business, and I'd like to find out what you plan to do, maybe connecting lake money or some such thing. Perhaps you could tell us in a few words. Thank you. Start with you.
I'll stand here just so they can see me. Roger, I lived half a kilometer away for 34 years, and I know what impact that'll be. So I'm going to tell you where I am in the situation. Because I'm in the midst of an election, I don't want to look like an opportunist way to get involved. But I have been working with a group, as you know. I've been to meetings where you've been, where Mr. Kerr's been, to try to help them out, and I've been helping them out in the background. If I'm fortunate, 2 weeks tonight, to be the member, I'm not going to promise a bag of money, but damn it, I'm going to fight, take whatever opportunity, whatever tools I have provincially to make sure that the federal government comes good. We're not going to accept a one-lane bridge. It's not going to happen. I have a solution for our federal cousins. They send a pile of money to Quebec. We need some of the money in Ontario. It's shortchanging Ontario all the way. I I have a second suggestion. If they could stop spending some of that action money that we see ads every day, just save some of that for the dam bridge down the road. Or stop sending flyers at home on my house, which they go in the trash. So all I will say, those are, one good suggestion that I will make to them, because we're not going to accept a one, I don't care if it's in Concord 64, half a kilometer away from my house, whether it's in Hastings, whether it's in Warcourt, it just does not make sense. Thank you.
You're here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I have been in touch and spoken with Rick Norlock on a couple of occasions regarding the Murray Canal Bridge, and to me, it just makes sense that, it is a two-lane bridge. We have the crews working there to do the work. The footings are going to be poured there for the sake of a couple of extra 100,000 or whatever the cost would be. To me, it just makes logistical sense and practical sense, especially when you have the mass volume of people going to Lou's Racetrack and also tourists coming here fishing and stuff like that, and traversing between here and Trenton and so on and down into the county. Yeah, I will work diligently with the federal counterparts to ensure that there's also hopefully maybe some provincial funds that help on that project, although it is a federal issue. That's what our job as an elected representative to Queen's Park is. So, absolutely.
And I apologize for our speakerphone here. It did work a few minutes ago, but I'm going to have to ask each person to stand up and come to the mic.
Little, but I don't think this is the first time that I've been disappointed in the federal perspective on what works for municipalities. I went to talk to Rick Norlock when they expropriated Class 1 farmland not too far from here in Trenton. And that was Mr. Meyer's farm, in order to put a new base there or extend the base. So I was even in touch with Rona Ambrose, but the expropriation laws are federal, and Mr. Norlock was just insistent that it was going to make all kinds of difference for jobs. But my point was, you can't grow anything on asphalt. So why would you cover up Class 1 farmland? It makes absolutely no sense. So to me, that's just an indication that the communication lines are broken down. Same with the bridge. Listen to the people. They're the ones who live here. They're the ones who are paying the taxes. They're the ones whose lives are going to be impacted, not somebody in Ottawa and not somebody in BC. So opening up those lines of communication, making sure that we as politicians understand exactly what it is that you need in order to function, and then it's our job to find the resources to make that happen.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to put a one-lane bridge there. Let's just be honest about that. And it's been many, many years now that the federal and provincial governments have been ignoring infrastructure. And governments are there to help make people's lives better, not to make them worse. So putting a one-lane bridge seems like a huge step backwards to me. We've got our own bridge issues in the north part of the riding too, because in Hastings and in Campbellford, there's bridge issues. Big time, dividing the communities. And to be honest, it's taking way too long for the federal Conservatives to come to the table and actually make a financial commitment, which, to be honest, for the federal government is not a lot of money. But for here and for these communities, it makes a huge impact on your day-to-day life. When you have to line up to go across a bridge and, they're going to take the bridge out in Hastings, so people are going to have to drive 50 kilometers around the town just to get to work every day. You know, it's ridiculous. So it's time that the government's actually got serious about taking care of the people that actually elect them. And that's all of you.
I don't know if I need a mic. This question is for Lou, please. Why is our Minister of Agriculture, Catherine Lynn, investing $2 million into Kentville College and yet not accepting new registrations for the fall, only to close the college, saying there wasn't enough registrations to keep it open? Does she want to kill the farming in our country so we have to import our food too?
Thank you, and I'm happy to have that question. The government has invested over $150 million in risk management over the last, since 2011 budget, frankly, and the Conservatives voted against it, and the NDP supported it. We just announced $40 million a year to enhance food processing and agriculture. That's in our budget. It's in that budget, which will be introduced if we form government on June the 13th or thereabouts. As far as Kentville, for the people that haven't been involved, Kentville College is a campus of Guelph University. Enrollment was down, and some people don't believe on that, but the reality is enrollment was down. Guelph University was going to close it. What did the Premier and Minister of Agriculture, same person, and the Minister of College, they give them an infusion of $2 million while there's a local working group to try to find a solution to keep Kentville whole. It's not, you know, the Conservatives think that they just, you know, they want to be fiscally responsible, yet here they just want to throw money and throw money. The government's committed to find a permanent solution, not a patchwork solution, so the $2 million will keep the college going, and I'm confident that if we form government by the end of this year, there'll be a permanent solution for Canada.
Well, thank you, and obviously I disagree with Lou's assessment of the situation at Kentville. The $2 million allocated to Kentville College, not one red cent goes toward any agricultural courses. So students who want to go and learn about the high-tech skills and get the skill-based knowledge and expertise in agriculture and agribusiness, there's nothing there for them to enroll. So in fact, there is going to be no ag courses there should the Liberals take power on June 13th. You know, we're not, you know, Mr. Rinaldi said the Conservative way is just throwing money at the solution to fix it. Well, no, that's the Liberal way of trying to solve problems, Lou. But, you know, and the Green Energy Act is a perfect example of that. The Liberals have thrown away over $20 billion into the Green Energy Act, wind and solar, that actually produces less than 3% of the energy here in the province of Ontario. And it's hard to understand or conceptualize what $1 billion is, but if you were to burn, and we had one young lad here when we were at DNSS say, well, it's an investment. Well, no, sorry. An investment is something that you get a return on. When you throw away $20 billion, and the young lad pointed out, if you were to burn $1 million a day, it would take over 65 years to burn $20 billion. So the young lad who asked the question would actually be in a retirement home or a long-term care facility before that investment was paid back, not even including the interest. So Kentville College, absolutely. Agriculture is the second largest employer, the #1 job creator in the province of Ontario. If I'm fortunate enough to be your representative, you have my word. I'm very passionate about this as a farmer myself. I will make it a priority, and we will keep the Kentville College open.
Well, students not registering to take agricultural courses? Well, they need to be able to have the use of their education to make a livelihood. If we don't make farming something that is profitable, gives young farmers a way of seeing a future for their life, a future that is not just scraping by, but actually a comfortable living, so that they can pay for the tuition fees for their children who will hopefully also want to be farmers. It's becoming a high-tech business. You need really specific skills. You need to know more about technology. You need, of course, the Greens would love it if everybody became an organic farmer. That would really be awesome. But that's probably not going to happen in my lifetime. So we need to help make this a choice. So it's doctor, lawyer, teacher, farmer. Make that part of the choices for young people in terms of looking at their future and how they're going to make a living that will allow them to have a quality of life.
Yeah, this is good. Local food is one of the fastest growing areas of any business sector. Now, Eastern Ontario has an incredible tradition of farming and value-added processing. It doesn't make any sense to close down Kentville College when the average age of farmers in Eastern Ontario is over 55 years old and they're approaching, retirement, hopefully. But young people also need to learn how to do those things. They need to learn how to farm. And they need help with business management courses, because running a farm is also running a business. So they need help with that. They need help with marketing, because they want to do direct marketing now. Farmers markets, food hubs, retail stores on farms, on-farm processing. I helped a creamery near Kingston, Limestone Creamery, did their business plan so they could do processing right on their farm. They've got the next generation on that farm because they're adding value on the farm. There's no reason why we can't move in that direction. Let's have a vision together of a prosperous rural and farming community. We can have that. There's no reason to close Kentville College.
Hey guys, doing today? My name is Jonah. I have a question for Rob. When Tim Hudak says he's going to cut people in the public sector, is he referring to the bureaucrats at the top, or is he referring to the frontline workers such as teachers, policemen, firemen, and jobs like that? Can you please specify who exactly he's referring to?
Well, thank you, Jonah, for the question. And of course, we've heard this mantra extensively throughout the campaign that Tim Hudak and the PCs are going to cut and slash and burn 100,000 public sector workers. And as I alluded to in my opening, there's 1.2 million public sector workers currently in the province of Ontario, and any given year, 4 to 6% attrition rates over the course of 4 years. That's 220,000 public sector workers retiring. We're going to be hiring 120. What we're saying is, and Smokey Thomas, the union leader, he agrees that currently there's about 60,000 middle management jobs in the bureaucracies here, in all the ministries or departments under the various ministries that could be, cut out. These are jobs of individuals making well over $100,000 a year. So are there going to be some, we've made it very clear that nursing and policing will not be touched. Number one, we will not be getting rid of any nurses or policing, but there are going to be some cuts in the bureaucracy. And unfortunately, we are keeping not unfortunately that we're keeping full-day kindergarten, but unfortunately there will be some job losses through ECEs and stuff in the classroom. Thank you for the question.
Anything else like my comment on that?
Sure. I wasn't going to pass this one by. Thanks very much. So what Rob is saying, so that you understand, they're just going to cut people when they retire. So a water inspector retires, we're not going to replace them because they retire. It's attrition. We have, and you know what happened to a situation where they weren't adequate because of the same government doing some cuts back in a few years back. So we have special assistants in the classroom. They're not protected. They're gone. But guess what, teacher? You're going to be protected. Well, no, the teachers are not protected. They're going to have bigger class sizes. Junior kindergarten, one of the things that's been praised all over the world, not Ontario. Yeah, we're going to make some cuts to those too. So, you know, I have a hard time saying that we're going to do get rid of 100,000 public servants in the province of Ontario, and there's going to be no harm done. The other thing, and I don't make this up, that's what economists tell me, and I'm not an economist, that when you cut 100,000 jobs, in this case in the province of Ontario, there's probably another 50 or 60,000 in the private sector that are going to be affected. I mean, you know, we've seen what happens to some small towns when they lose a one-town industry. This is equivalent. Not only that industry goes, but the other, you know, the corner store, the grocery store, the beer store, the liquor store, and on and on and on and on. So to say that you're going to cut 100,000 jobs just with a swoop of a pen and not make any damage, I'm sorry, I don't get it. Thank you.
Well, I mean, for the Greens, it's not just about jobs, it's about communities. And how embedded in a community is sustainability. And when you are attacking a sector of the community, then you are really talking about making the whole system more fragile. So we know it's going to have an impact in the classroom. We know it's going to have an impact on meat inspection. We know these things are going to come down. So as much as we know that the progressive conservatives really want to balance those books, just like Mr. Harris wanted to balance those books in the 90s. And then what happened? It all got downloaded onto the municipalities, who then had to download it on the property owners. So it's just the domino effect. It's not really solving anything. It's just pushing one problem onto the next until, guess what? All the dominoes are down. And the Greens think that is untenable.
Well, I think Mr. Hudak put his own foot in it. Because he's the one who's been talking from the day one of this campaign about 100,000 job cuts. So, now I don't understand anything Rob said, personally. I just don't get what he's talking about. Because 100,000 job cuts is 100,000 job cuts. That's a lot of families that depend on that income to buy groceries, to pay the rent or the mortgage, to buy clothes for their kids, all that stuff. That is hardship, not just on those families, but all the local businesses that they support. And to be honest, the government is an important employer in the province of Ontario. And it has been for a long time, and hopefully it's going to continue to be an important employer. So we should be pleased that we're able to get the kind of services that we can get through the government of Ontario. It is a good thing. Now, I'm a business person, and when I look at my cash flow, I look at the money coming in as well as the money going out. All the conservatives seem to be looking at is the money going out. But at the same time, they want to cut corporate taxes. Well, if you keep cutting the sales revenue in a business, then you're not going to be able to pay your employees, are you? So let's stop the tax cuts. All they do is hoard money anyway. They're not creating new jobs. We've lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs since 2002. Who's kidding us here? Let's get real and talk about the facts.
Good evening. My name's Betty Warren, and this question is directed solely to Mr.
Speak louder.
Okay. This question is directed solely to Mr. Milligan and to Mr. Rinaldi, only because they are the only ones who have sat as an MPP. which one of the projects that you personally spearheaded while you were sat as an MPP are you most proud of? Mr. Housen?
Projects or private members, Bill, or ideas, or,
Any other projects?
any? All right, well, one of the things that I'm a huge fan of that I'm trying to promote is, of course, small hydroelectric projects here in Northumberland 20 West. We've identified 37 sites, and if those projects were to be developed, you're looking at enough clean, renewable, and reliable and sustainable, well over 100 years, electricity for about 15,000 homes. Not only that, it's also in part the conservation of water, which is near and dear to me as sort of I used to fish quite often, but now I don't any longer, given the role that I'm in. But you know, one of the things that we've realized is that the local streams are too warm for the brownies and the speckles to spawn in. And so what we need to do is make sure that those spawning grounds are there to attract more tourists to fish. When it comes to private members, Bill 58 is on top of my list, organ and tissue donation. You know, it was an initiative that I brought forward so that if an individual was to renew their driver's license or their health card, they had to fill out a questionnaire, and they could opt out of donating their organs or tissues because of personal or religious reasons. But one of the specific ties to that bill that passed second reading unanimously until the government was prorogued, so it was cleared off the docket. But it enabled the wishes of the individual donating their organs or tissues to not be revoked by their loved ones, because upwards between 60 and 80% of people who do sign the organ and tissue donation cards, their loved ones revoke that, and so their organs and tissues are not used to save the lives of others. And I think that's extremely important. It's not partisan, and it's something I think that all parties can agree on. And that's something that I would love to bring forward again. Thank you.
Can I ask a supplemental question? Have any of those projects created any jobs? Simple yes.
Well, the organ and tissue donation private members bill died when the government prorogued. Would it create jobs? I would imagine it might in the healthcare system. I don't know specifically. Of the 37 sites, hopefully that will come to fruition. Yeah, absolutely. You're talking about a lot of local excavating that's going to have to be done. You're looking at small business, excavation businesses. You're looking at electricians that are going to have to hook up the systems. You're talking about a company that actually, when I was talking to, was looking to relocate to Canada, new water turbines. We're looking for a place to situate themselves here in North America. I spoke to them, directed them to the various Cramahe Township in Coburg, because they wanted to be close to that area. And I actually had a company arranged a meeting with the company to meet with Trent Hills, because they wanted to develop the site up in Hastings. So would it create local jobs? Absolutely. Has it yet? No, but we're hoping.
Thank you. Thanks, Betty, for the question. Look, I was in Queen's Park for years, and when it comes to job creation and being past chair of the Economic Development Commission, I realize what we need to do to bring jobs in the area. Because I know I dealt with directly as chair of the Economic Development Commission, which is Brighton, Quinte West, and Belleville. And it's a competitive world. I was able in 2007 to convince the Premier and folks put together a platform that we needed a separate development fund for Eastern Ontario, because just like Northern Ontario has a fund, I felt that, and I was very, very fortunate to be able to convince the folks to have $20 million a year in the fund to help industry in Eastern Ontario. As I mentioned before, just today I visited Metro Paper in Trenton. They started with 25 people from scratch. Now they have 5 lines, I believe, 75 people. And guess what? One of the lines, they brought it back up from a plant they have in New York State. Because, you know, good people in Quinte West that work there, they're good, solid workers, very productive. So it's their own. So I believe if one takes count, somewhere between 700 or 800 jobs were created by these funds. And not all 20 million came to this riding, I should say. I mean, they're all for Eastern Ontario. And we saved a bunch because some companies were able to expand. When it comes to the public issues, when I first got elected in 2003, Port Hope had just lost their hospital. They came running to me, and I said, you know, I can't guarantee you another hospital because they built a brand new one in Coburg, and we have to be realistic, right? But they now have a community health center, providing great service for that community. A community health center in Coburg, a community health center in Brighton, a YMCA in Trenton. I mean, Mayor Williams, I was on speed dial because they've been planning for that YMCA over 10 years, and I was able to help them with some help to get. And recently, the marina in Quinte West, even though I wasn't as an MVP in the last 2.5 years, but I certainly helped them navigate through the channels to make sure he got the approvals to get it done. And the list goes on, but all I'm saying is that I was committed to the communities that I worked with, and I had a fantastic relationship with the leaders of those communities, and we got a lot done. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Christine. My question is for Mr. Rinaldi. You said today that you were at Metro Papers and that they employ 75 people currently. How many of those jobs are actually through that company, and how many of them are through temp agency, where if you call in sick, or if you are sick, you don't get paid, and you get bumped to the bottom of the list, and they might not call you in tomorrow? And I also want to know, with this pension plan that the Liberals have decided, how much more money can I afford to pay? I think I should be able to look after my own retirement.
Well, thank you for the question. So, to be specific, just because I met with them today, so I know the numbers. So I'm glad you brought it up. So out of the 75 people, there's about 10 that are from temp agencies, but not on a permanent basis, because their workload shifts pretty rapidly. But I can tell you that a lot of the temps is because they can't get full-time workers. That's one of the things that the general...
Excuse me, Mr.
Well, I just spoke with the manager today.
Okay, but do you know how many people, I believe that your numbers are wrong.
Well, I believe my numbers are 100% correct, because I was there 5 hours ago, and I got a witness right here that was with me.
Okay, and that's fine. I mean, how many people in Brighton work for 10 agencies?
I have no idea. All I'm saying, the manager there today, they got an ongoing application process for full-time people, and some of the temps, you asked me a question, I was there just today, and we had this discussion. My numbers are correct, somewhere 10 to 12 people are from temp, but that fluctuates very much, and it doesn't go much above 12. That's what the manager told me, the plan manager. But the fact is that they got about 75 total, so about 60 are permanent jobs, working 4 days, 12 hours a day, like firefighters do. Next day, and I'm certain that's the plan manager lied to me today. As far as pension, I'm delighted that you can save for your future. Kudos to you. But there's a lot of people out there, whether it's minimum wage or are not able to meet ends meet. We've introduced a pension plan, which, by the way, originally was supported, was an idea of the NDP, but then they kind of got cold feet, and they didn't want to support the budget. So it's a 1.9% from the employer, 1.9% from the employee, and it's lined up together with certain rules and regulation as the Canada Pension Plan. So if the federal government ever wants to realize the necessity, we'll be able to put it together. And I tell you, it's going to make a big difference to social services when these people are able to collect some of the money when it matures, I won't benefit from it if it comes into play, but my kids and grandkids will. And I think they don't have to worry about living on $6,000 or $7,000 a year. Thank you.
I think this is an issue where each gets to speak on, okay?
Good call.
Well, thank you very much, and the last 2.5 years that I've represented Northumberland 20 West, I've had countless individuals come into my office who are working for a temp agency, and one of them, I don't know if what the young lady said was true or not, but she said currently in the province of Ontario there's more temp agencies than Tim Hortons, and I balk at that, but I don't know the specifics, but temp agencies are a serious problem, I believe, here in the province of Ontario. We have to look at that and review that, and I've mentioned this in caucus numerous times. When it comes to the Liberal proposed Ontario retirement pension plan, this is going to be devastating on the province of Ontario economically. We're already in a fragile state, and there's a reason why, when Mr. Flaherty was still with us and the federal finance minister, the feds didn't move on this. Because what it's going to do, and the Liberal financial experts have even told the Premier, that it will actually kill 150,000 small to mid-sized business jobs here in the province of Ontario, and here's why. You're going to have to pay as an employee anywhere from $40 to $70 to $90 a week out of your pocket. The employer has to match that. And it's going to hurt not-for-profit organizations even more. So talk to the members from United Way and so on, and they're going to tell you that they're going to have to lay off people that raise money for your local charities. If you look at the numbers for Northumberland Queen West alone, it will suck approximately $118 million out of the local economy. So if you're a small business owner trying to expand or hire other individuals here in the area, that's $118 million that is a payroll tax that the Liberals are going to introduce, and it's not going to have it's going to have a massive effect on the number of businesses in Europe.
So, temp agencies are there for their clients, or are they for themselves? It sounds to me like there isn't really a future for individuals in looking at their life as working for temp agencies. So that kind of a reliance, that kind of a relationship is something that it has to be really looked at very hard and seriously. Who can support themselves just by working in part-time situations? The Green Party really thinks that what our responsibility is as representing you is that we find a way to guarantee an annual income for you. So one of the ways that that's going to happen is that we need to look at the way taxes are being used or misused, depending on your point of view. And we really believe that by raising corporate tax 1%, which still means that it is lower than anywhere else in North America, we think that that will go a long way to helping situations like this. That's our hope.
So there was two questions really, and one was around the temp agencies and low-paying work, precarious work, part-time work, and no job security, no guarantee of hours, no guarantee of income. There's so many jobs like that in Ontario now. We've exported so many of our good-paying jobs down to Mexico, China, the United States. Those are economic policies that were brought in by the Conservatives and the Liberals. So let's just be clear about that. And in terms of the Canada Pension Plan and the proposed Ontario Pension Plan, Yes, that was an NDP idea, and it was originally, because Tommy Douglas made that happen federally. And without Canada Pension Plan and old age security and guaranteed income supplement, we would have a whole lot of people, older people, especially older women, living in poverty. That's the reality. And yes, it's great when people can save for their own retirement. And the reality is, with housing prices, the cost of gas, electricity and hydro rates going up, HST brought on to everything that we buy, it's not so affordable anymore to live in Ontario. And it's hard to save money. And if you have a young family and both parents are working, like when I was a kid, one parent only had to work to have a middle-class life. Now, both parents have to work to have a middle-class life, right? And to try and save money for tuition for their kids to go to university or college or do an apprenticeship, it's really hard. As well as trying to pay mortgages, as well as trying to, save money for retirement. So the NDP wants to create employment that is good employment, that provides people with a decent wage, that also provides them with benefits, including retirement benefits. So you work your whole life. At the end of your life, you should be able to relax and not worry about how you're going to buy food the next day.
I don't know whether you know or not, but Montreal is in the process of building a bridge, and Steve Harper has said that they should have a toll to pay for it, and Justin Trudeau has said, no, the rest of Canada should give them a gift of taxes. Just add Murray Canal Bridge to the list and send your letter to Justin Trudeau, and I'm sure he'll build us a bridge. Anyhow, and a question. I'm sure he could afford it. I spend a lot of time on my weekends up at a restaurant, local restaurant, where a lot of business people go. And a lot of them are talking about what's going on in their particular business. If you drive up any street in any town, you'll see that they're closing up one after another. From Port Hope to Cobourg to Colborne to Brighton to Trenton, everywhere. When I spoke, and I do apologize for not remembering your name, but when I spoke to you about small business, you talked about businesses making $5 million a year. We have forgotten all of those little businesses that are struggling. They can't afford to pay the employee added benefits that they have to pay. They cannot afford an additional 1.9%. $2,000 a month in workers' compensation alone for small businesses. Where is the government in helping these poor little struggling businesses that are providing work for a great portion of the population in this area? My son is on the verge of bankruptcy because of the policies of this government that doesn't really understand what small business is. What are you going to do to help them?
Thank you very much, not just for your question, but your passion. I'm actually a small businessman myself. I run my own business, and I've helped hundreds of people start businesses, so I understand that whole aspect of small businesses. One of the things the NDP would do would cut the small business tax 1.5%. Right now it's 4.5% for small businesses in Ontario, so we take 1.5%. So that's a 30%, 33% tax cut for small businesses. The reason we want to do that is for exactly the reason you said. It's the small businesses that keep our communities alive, that keep the main streets in our rural communities alive, and employ people, create employment for local people. And a lot of people are entrepreneurs now because the other option is precarious work, right? Because the good jobs aren't there anymore. So people go into entrepreneurship. So we want to support entrepreneurship. In Campbellford, the Aaron Theatre was failing. So we took it over as a community-owned cooperative because we wanted to keep that small business going. we've quadrupled revenue of that theater from 65,000 a year to almost 200,000 a year. It's a great little success story. Other people in our communities can do that too. There's no way that we need to just allow our main streets to get gutted.
Well, yes, I think it's the small businesses that kept Ontario its head above water, so to speak, in terms of the recession. And we know that it creates millions of jobs as well. So the Green Party would absolutely help with the tax burden. That's just a given. And also to help out with the problems with running a small business, which is paying for heating, use of electricity, all those sorts of things. The whole idea of being in a community and cooperating also means that the municipality should be involved in those kinds of conversations. I know it is in Cobourg, for example. So we have a vitalization program that was started by a group of citizens, and it's exactly the same as what Ross was talking about. That the community forges ways and visions, ways of making the community thrive through their small businesses, whether it's through incentives with tourism, and the provincial politicians have a role to play in that by helping the municipalities find the resources and giving them the resources, giving them grants, giving them incentive pay, giving them tax cuts. So those are all the kinds of strategies that the Green Party would absolutely look at.
Thank you very much for the question, and you're absolutely right that small businesses were the backbone of the economy and still are very much so, obviously, that what we need to do is ensure that small businesses have an environment conducive to so that they can expand, that they can reinvest in their business, and that they can employ people. And what we don't want to do is, bring in the Ontario Retirement Pension Plan, which I said the Liberals' own financial experts say will kill 150,000 small to mid-size business jobs here in the province of Ontario. We're looking at reducing red tape. One of the things that I hear constantly from small businesses when I'm around the riding and going in and saying hello and everything and listening to what they have to say. Red tape is number one. Even in farming here, the average farmer spends 1 month a year doing paperwork. Maybe not themselves, but they have to hire someone, or they're spending a month a year on paperwork for the government. So to me, this makes no sense. And as my Green Party colleague touched on, energy is massive. Electricity bills are skyrocketing. They've tripled under the Liberal government the last decade, and businesses are struggling. And so absolutely, we have a plan, and hopefully someone will ask a question on electricity shortly, so that we can go in more into depth on that, because I only have 15 seconds. But yes, so that's what it is. Red tape, no Ontario pension plan, and getting affordable energy under control. Thank you very much for the question.
Thanks for the question. I've been self-employed all my life, small business owner. By the way, people keep on referring to Brighton Speedway. My family owns it. Races are Saturday night at 7 o'clock. Since you brought it up a couple of times, I feel I better complete the message. So look, I understand small business, because a lot of times on Friday was a matter of we have to pay the employees, how much can we spend, or we have hot dogs for the rest of the week with 4 growing kids at one time. So what are we going to do? The question was, what are we going to do? we're going to create jobs. We're not going to slash 100,000 jobs, because those 100,000 jobs are going to affect those businesses you see on Main Street. They're going to affect everybody. So we have a plan to create jobs, and I think I talked about that a little bit earlier on. I'm not going to repeat it. So that if we create those jobs, people can buy things, they can pay taxes to protect the quality service that Ontarians get, and we want to maintain that. We don't want to diminish it. So that's our plan. We have some $2.5 billion over the next 10 years to incent the expansion and growth of business because it's working. I mean, you know, I used one example here today. Do they all work? No. I mean, nothing is ever perfect, and I want to be fair. But so that's our plan, and you know, we need to build the economy, not kill it. Thank you.
My question relates to education, and even though it has been touched on slightly, this question is primarily directed at the provincial Conservatives, and I would like to know, with the reduction in EAs that is being proposed, what assistance is there going to be for teachers to be able to handle the increase in disabilities that we are seeing with the new population of students that are coming in your budget?
Yeah, that's a great question. My wife is an elementary teacher, grade 3 going on to grade 1. She's doing the EQO right now, and don't need to get restarted on the EQO testing, which I'm trying to do. But anyways, yeah, absolutely. Are there going to be some individuals, ECEs, that lose their job? I'm not going to lie to you. We are focusing, however, on ECEs that are currently in the full-day kindergarten program. We've made it very clear from the start that any young students or students that are identified with IEPs that are currently receiving special needs help, we will maintain that status quo. But when it comes to ECEs in the full-day kindergarten program, unfortunately, that's where we have to make the cuts.
Yeah, I'm not as tall as these other guys. A good question, and it's something that certainly I'm struggling with. I was talking to a couple of young students that were here tonight, and they have real concern. We're going to post-secondary education, the majority of the courses, I think, not all of them, they now get a 30% reduction in their tuition fee. I'm going to go to that, and I'll get back to the secondary, to the primary grades. That's going to be gone. 30%, you know, and it's been very, very clear. I'm going to go back to the elementary. I have a daughter that's a teacher, you know, and same as Rob is a teacher, and his wife is a teacher. I mean, the struggle is she does a lot of math stuff. That's what she specializes on. She knows how many kids need special help. Those assistants will be gone. The class sizes will be bigger. We have the best, and it's not the Liberal Party that's saying it, we have one of the best education systems showing the best results in the English-speaking world. There's people from around the world that come to Ontario to see what kind of education. Is there a cost to it? Absolutely. And we plan to keep those investments to make sure that we keep the best education system. Thank you.
Well, I was an educator for over 40 years. So one of the big changes that I saw, I just retired fully 3 years ago in Toronto. But one of the things that I noticed towards the end of my experiences in the classroom was the amount of special needs kids, and certainly autistic children who need so much more in terms of one-on-one support. And I'm worried about those kids. And that proportion of the young population in our schools is not getting smaller. It's actually getting larger. And that has to do lots of speculation, there's all kinds of research saying it's environmental. That's why you should vote for the Greens, because we would definitely clean up the environment. But also, if you're going to cut, these are the most vulnerable individuals in our society, and they have no other recourse but to depend on us for support and for their education. And with these cuts, they are going to continue to be the most vulnerable, and they are not going to get the help that they need. So that's a big, big red flag as far as I'm concerned.
So the question was educational assistance in the public schools. And the NDP feels that public education is the foundation of our democracy. It's also the way that people can lift themselves up through education, right? And so we would continue to support the education assistance in the classrooms. So the teachers need help, let's face it. I mean, you have young people that have disabilities and mental challenges, etc. And we don't want to segregate them from the rest of society. We want to have people together so that they build tolerance and understanding, and the teachers need help. So education assistance is important. The other aspect is the NDP we've got all these schools, especially in rural areas, that are empty a lot of the time. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to help to create community activities in the schools, to use the gymnasiums. Like, our kids need to get more exercise. Okay, we do too, right? But our kids need more exercise. I mean, there's too many people that are unhealthy for putting too much weight on, too much time in front of their screens. So let's get them active. Let's get them out having fun at the schools. We've got all these facilities. Let's use them.
I'm Mary Short, and I'm here today representing the Federated Women's Institute of Ontario, commonly known as the WI. And just a bit of background, the Federated Women's Institutes of Ontario is a not-for-profit charitable organization with affiliations around the world, working with and for women in rural and small-town Ontario. Through the network of branches, we offer education programs, community support, advocate for social, environmental, and economic change, and work towards personal growth for all women, for home and country. This resolution is written out of concern, or this comment is written out of concern for the health and well-being of future generations of Ontario citizens. We are extremely concerned about the fact that our young people are not being taught human nutrition and healthy cooking at school during their formative years. They may be taught the Canadian Food Guide, but this tends to be incidental and taught by teachers who have little background knowledge of applied human nutrition. The present Ontario Ministry of Education has been working to updating the Family Studies curriculum for Ontario for about 5 years. The latest curriculum was put in place between 1999 and 2000. We cannot allow the Ontario provincial government to delay putting a new program in place when the health of our children is at risk and our healthcare system is already strained. We are advocating for reinstitution of a school program which will help every person in Ontario to know good human nutrition basics, teach each person to cook healthy and less expensive meals, teach a healthy and sustainable lifestyle which supports all contributors of Ontario society. Whereas the Canadian Government of Ontario Medical Association have expressed concern regarding our citizens' nutrition and poor food choices and the resulting potential increase of health care and job-related costs. And whereas the Women's Institutes of Ontario believe that knowledge of human nutrition and cooking skills are essential to a healthy population, be it resolved that the Ontario Ministry of Education develop a lifestyle program which will teach all Ontario students cooking skills, human nutrition, and other wellness practices which will contribute to a healthy modern society. Now, I'm not talking about the family studies, which is an optional high school course. We are talking about something at the elementary level, starting at grade 3, 4, and 5. There are already some components in the grade 4 and then grade 11, which teachers may, if they choose, include that in their correction, but it is not a mandatory curriculum course. So we're talking about something that has a lot more long-term effect. So, question. There is a question. Well, the question is, as the MP representative of your party, each of you, how would you address this resolution which will contribute to a healthy future society?
Well, that's one of the best ideas I think I've heard for a while, and the Women's Institute is a fantastic institution, and it honestly just makes complete sense. I mean, the reality is that with all the processed food, all the sugar and the high fructose corn syrup that's in all the food, and all the white flour and all that stuff, that's one of the reasons people aren't healthy, and one of the reasons they're putting on so much weight. So teaching them how to cook local, in-season foods, how to can foods, all the things our grandmothers did, frankly, right? And that the Women's Institute supported, we absolutely would support that.
Well, I'm a seasoned educator. As a matter of fact, in the days that I started teaching, we had one ministry called Health and Education. It was known over 40, 50 years ago that health and education were related. So this somehow got lost in translation in the subsequent decades through specialization. We were taught to be generalists. So at every opportunity, we would bring those kinds of understandings between health and education to our students. And the Green Party, of course, that is the underpinning of understanding about the importance of our farmland and of agriculture. And again, putting the prominence of farmers first and foremost in the minds of the children as they're eating their wonderful produce that they've created in their community garden. This would be the most inspiring kind of legislation that we would be able to introduce on your behalf. And I would be happy to be there to do that. That would bring me great joy.
Yes, well, thank you very much for the question. And, I met with the ladies regarding this issue. I took the petitions up to Queen's Park. I presented them in the chamber. In fact, I sat down with Ernie Hardeman, our agriculture and food critic, and we discussed it, we hammered it out, and we brought forward an amendment to the Liberal bill, the Local Foods Act, that would actually implement curriculum to the effect that, everything that you were asking for, to the cross T and dotted I, would be implemented, and the Liberals and NDP voted against that amendment. It was an amendment to the local field. It had nothing to do with having any other impact, negative or positive otherwise, to the Local Food Act that the Liberals introduced. But both parties voted against it, and you're absolutely right. I have two young daughters who, I'm proud to say, joined the 4-H garden club, and so, they were there last night, and they're learning to grow their own food, and when they harvest it, they're going to learn to preserve. that food. So I think it's a wonderful idea, and if I'm fortunate enough to be elected on June 12th, I will definitely bring that forward again, and hopefully we can get it passed this time.
Thanks, Mary. That's a great question. And thank you to Women's Institute for the work you do. You're the silent giant behind things that happen. For people that don't know, it was the Women's Institute, but today we have pasteurized milk. It was their idea. They made it happen. So thank you. And if you ever have an opportunity to attend a WI meeting, because it's like secret meetings that happen, nobody knows except them, they have the best cookies ever. I can attest to that. Okay, perfect. So, Mary, just a quick little history lesson. We used to do a lot of that stuff in high schools before. Back 1995, I don't have to go into a lot of details, all the shops and all the culinary stuff, gone. With the stroke of a pen, it was a cut in education. So those things were done. It's coming back slowly. I mean, it is coming back slowly, but I think we need to move faster. And I say that because I had the good fortunes of attending, I think it's Coburg East. It's got a culinary class. Best food ever. Those kids should be all cooks somewhere down the road. So it's coming back, but I think with the work that you, when I say you, WI does to put the pressure on, I'm confident that will happen. So I too, as my colleague said, that if I'm able to do something on January, I keep saying January, June, I said this every night. I don't know why I got January, it's such a bad month this year, so cold. But June 13th, it's certainly something that I would love to champion. Thank you.
Just want to continue on about the small businesses. Subcontractors. If you subcontract to a contractor and that contractor, after the job is done, declares bankruptcy, you don't get paid. If that contractor decides not to pay you at all, you don't get paid. If you go to collect your money and they give you part of it and say, take me to court for the rest of it, you don't get paid. So what is the government going to do to help these subcontractors who are losing thousands of dollars? And I've talked to people who have lost $60,000, $120,000 as a subcontractor. Secondly, a lot of the local contractors have worked long years to build reputations, and they're good contractors. And yet, those contractors are now having to pay a $15,000 fee set aside for this carry-on number for every house that they build. So if you're a small contractor and you build 2 houses a year, you have to set aside $30,000. If you are a big contractor and you're building a big subdivision and you bring in subcontractors, you pay the $15,000 a year, but you don't have building inspectors come in for every house, electrical inspectors, plumbing inspectors. They don't inspect all of them, they inspect 1 out of about 15. Why is it the local contractors are spending $15,000 when every home they do is inspected by everyone? They can't afford to do that. So a lot of them are no longer building new houses. They're trying to find jobs elsewhere. So they put in bids for business. And what they discover is that a lot of people are doing under-the-table work and can afford to put in bids of much less because they're not paying workers' compensation, they're not paying benefits of any size, they're not having to have the overhead, and they're not getting the jobs. So what is the government going to do to help support these local contractors, subcontractors, who are finding it incredibly each year, more and more difficult to maintain their businesses?
Yes. Well, it is important to have a level playing field, right? So the underground economy, which is pretty rife, and you're talking about construction and contracting and residential construction and that sort of thing. So obviously there's a lot of underground economy, and that is illegal, right? And that needs, the government has a job to enforce the laws and the rules that we have in our society, which would mean that we need to find ways to do that. And that's something, you know, that we would have to look at. I don't have a clear answer for that, for you specifically around that. But in terms of building inspections and things like that, you know, the building code was just recently updated. And I think one of the challenges with that is some of the building inspectors need more training and education on the building code. Like, they're not absolutely clear on it, and then that slows everything down in terms of inspections and not necessarily making the right decisions around installations of plumbing or electrical or other, you know, particularly structural things. So I think we have to make sure that it's enforced for everybody. We have those standards for a reason, because we don't want people to get hurt. And in terms of the Workers' Safety and Insurance Board, that organization needs to be shaken up big time. But it's there for a reason. If someone gets injured on the job, and there are thousands of people that do, they need to get compensation so that they can continue to, you know, live a decent life, even if they may not be able to go back to that same kind of work. So those kind of safety nets are there for a reason, particularly in construction jobs, which are fairly dangerous. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. Does it?
Not particularly. It's
No.
not giving solutions to a big problem.
Well, I think there's got to be a level playing field. We have rules, and everyone has to follow those rules. And we're good Canadians. We should be doing that. And they have to be enforced. So what can the government do? The government should enforce the very rules and laws that it puts in place. That's what needs to happen.
And so if we have those building inspectors doing their job, there should be no need for a $15,000 pay raise.
I agree.
Okay.
Well, I think what I'm hearing from your very astute observation is that the one-size-fits-all regulations just don't apply, because it's not one size. When you're talking about local and small contractors and subcontractors, should they be bearing the burden that they're bearing when really the financial burden can be borne much easier by larger builders? So that would be something that the Green Party would work with the local trade to figure out what exactly works. Because if it's not working and these skilled people are not able to use their skill to the benefit of their society, their community, then that's a disservice. That's a disservice to their skill that they have, to their ability to make a livelihood, and a disservice to the community. So we would definitely work with that organization in order to shed some light on how that needs to work more effectively.
Thank you very much. And the first part of your question when it comes to subcontracting and paying, you know, upfront or on time, I think all parties would agree that that's something that definitely has to be looked at. I know it was brought in front of the chamber and it was discussed in the chamber. Unfortunately, nothing happened with that bill to be moved forward. But absolutely, you know, what happens and what we've seen is larger companies come in, they subcontract to local companies, and then the larger companies withhold payment, and the little companies are stuck holding the bag, and that's not right. And absolutely, I'd be a strong voice to support legislation moving forward to protect that from happening. Now, when it comes to Terrion and the WSIB, we've made it very clear that should we form government, if we have that fortune, we would look at all agencies, boards, and commissions throughout the province, and WSIB definitely is broken. I mean, in the 2.5 years that I've had the pleasure of being the member, unbelievable the number of people who come in who are legitimately injured on the work site, and cannot get their premiums that they paid in. And it's bankrupting small businesses as well, to which you alluded to earlier. So WSIB, Terrion, another perfect example of over-regulation on small business and business in general, and is bankrupting this province.
Well, thank you for the question. As far as the issue with carry-on, the number of inspection, I mean, in my years as an MPP and 12 years in the municipal sector, both mayor and council, I met with a lot of local builders and, trades. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't have an answer for that for you because it's something that about carry-on piece with you have to pay more than a builder. I can't remember somebody knocking on my door with that burning issue, but if the burning issue exists, then yeah, we need to deal with it. But I'm just being honest, so I don't have, I mean, they came to see me for a lot of other issues, yes, but that particular, so but like I said, if it's an issue. As far as WSIB, there's a new chair of WSB, which was an astounding conservative member of Queen's Park. Liz.
Love Liz.
Yes, Liz is a great person, and she took over the chair of WSIB to hope to try to straighten things out. And she was a conservative member from Western Ontario.
Liberals bring in conservatives to clean up the mess.
Well, you know what, Rob, we pick good people to do the job. And she was a good person. I have a lot of respect for Liz. I worked with her at Queen's Park for 6 or 8 years. You want to call her a shot? Well, that's a shot. We believe in people that can do the job, and Liz can do it. I have no qualms about that whatsoever. So I hope that Liz Whitmer can take on the challenge as you brought forward. And frankly, my office staff, when I was an MPP, and me, took on a lot of cases for WSIB, for people on WSIB that had huge challenges, and in many cases were successful. So I guess we need to, WSB, it's an ongoing review. I'm not saying it's fixed, but in some cases it is getting better. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Bob Burke. Every 4 years or so, we get into this provincial and federal elections. The parties that are not in power are desperate to throw out the party that is in power, and they spend pre-election time tearing down the party that's in power with some blatant promises. They make promises, more jobs, cut taxes, we'll do this for you and we'll do that for you. The question I have to ask you is, if your party gets elected in the next election and break those promises, will you, as our elected representative, resign your job because your party has broken faith with the very people in this great region who elected you to that position? And I think the answer is as simple as yes or no. And Lou, it lets you off the hook because you're already in power. I say it lets you off the hook because the Liberals are already in power. I'm interested in what the other parties do.
Well, they broke their share of promises too.
That's why we're in this.
I'm just going to say, so is it a yes or a no?
No,
Which
you're on my
promise?
voice.
Promise of creating 1 million jobs. If we create 800,000, I'm not
I'm
going
saying
to.
if you break any promises that you're making to the people in this room, your party does, out of good faith, would you resign because we sent you there based on the promises that you made, your party made to us?
Why doesn't he stand one voice?
That's a yes or no.
No.
That would be giving up.
No.
I'm not going to be elected so that I can think about giving up something.
You're only
I'm going to
one
be elected
voice.
so that I can.
So in other words, you're not accountable.
Of course I'm accountable. What does that have to do with it? That's because I am accountable that I won't give up.
Yes. I think your question is about accountability. I mean, I can't answer that as a yes or no either. I mean, first of all, I'm here on behalf of Kira, so I guess I get out of that. Honestly, I think what would do us all a lot of good in politics is to try and work together more. Find ways. All of the parties have some good ideas. And I mean, there's like 35 parties in Ontario. There's not just the 4 that are up here, right? There's a lot of good ideas out there. So if we could work together more for the people of Ontario, which is once you're elected, you're supposed to work for everybody, not just your narrow constituency, right? But everyone. So I think if we can find ways, one way of doing that would be to have a proportional representation system so that people that actually voted for the people that they want in there, or the party, or those ideas, there'd then be that mixture of ideas. And you know, we're all human. So, you know, we're going to make mistakes, but let's try and do the best job that we can together.
Well, it's an excellent question, so let me say this to you. Because that's got quite a large scope, of promises. If there was something of extraordinary, out of this world, great promise, and I don't know where the line is. I think we'd have to assess it when that happens. And I could support my government. I couldn't do that. But let me say this though, that's got to be extremely, extremely extraordinary. But my style is, and I've done this for 8 years, and I think if you talk to some Liberal colleagues at Leeds Park that either are gone, I will fight like hell to make sure that if things tend to veer, one way or the other, not to our commitment, I will fight like hell, and I think that brings a lot more to the table than me just walking in.
Yes.
So I will, and I'm going to be honest, I spent 8 years there, and there was a lot of things I didn't agree with. And the premier, whoever Dalton was at that time, he heard about it loud and clear. And I'm proud to say that in a number of incidents, when I brought something up to that extent, that maybe it wasn't just me, other voices rose up within caucus, and some change of direction took place. But thank you for the question.
This is directed to the Liberal Party, Mr. Mulroney, and also I would like an answer from the other parties. How come the CEO for the Pan Am Games gets $640,000 to open up the Pan Am Games in Toronto, yet if everything comes in on budget and on time and schedule, he gets an $800,000 bonus? And that would pay for a lot of EOs and all those kids that need to be helped in school. I would like your answer, thank you.
It's an excellent question. So it's not, I'm not saying that that's a good thing that government does that, but they're negotiated contracts, just like the contract that was negotiated under the Conservatives and what Eleanor Clitheroe was fired. It cost the Liberal government, after they fired her, $20 million for just letting her go. So that's one heck of a severance, $20 million, and she sued the government for that. So I'm not saying two wrongs make a right, but is it 800,000? I don't know what the number is, but I take your word for it, that that's a number. Maybe it is high, and certainly, I wasn't there to make that decision. Not to walk away.
Excuse me, that number was in the paper.
Yeah, that's fine.
And just a minute, you said they didn't know what the figures were. $640,000 a year he gets.
I just gave you the credit for those numbers.
Okay, and
I agree with you.
And he also gets an $800,000 bonus. I've never had an $800,000 bonus in my life for doing my job.
Well, I'm agreeing with the numbers because I don't know.
I didn't know the numbers.
But I'm agreeing with you. You give me the benefit of the doubt. Do I support such an extravagant? No, but I tell you, there was some legislation at Queen's Park, and and I want to give credit to who credit due. It was in last year's budget, and it was an idea from the NDP that we should cap salaries, that we should review that, and that was in last year's budget. It was one of those things that was negotiated, and unfortunately, it didn't get that far before this government wasn't able to perform anymore. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and you know, this is exactly what's wrong, and I think Mr. Rinaldi and myself and all parties would agree that this is exactly what's wrong with government. This is one of the reasons why I had the honor of going to Queen's Park and saying, you know, these are the types of obscenities that need to be addressed. This, you know, paying somebody, and you hear the mantra, well, if you want quality people, you have to pay them, you know, a top dollar or what they'd be making in the private sector. Bollocks. If that were the case, the Premier of Ontario should be making $5 million, in my personal opinion. You can't be paying these people, you know, extravagant wages on the backs of the taxpayers who are struggling to keep their lights on, pay their mortgages. It's not right, it's not fair, and I've said so in caucus numerous times. It's just not right.
Well, this is where you can see how politicians can actually agree no matter what stripe they are wearing. And it's obscene that that kind of situation in terms of remuneration for work can exist. It boggles my mind that first of all, thankfully we're living in a democracy, so we can have those things published in the newspaper so we can read about them. But what are you going to do as an individual? The way that those sorts of things are going to get changed is by who you elect. Who do you trust is going to make a difference to not supporting that kind of a policy? That's the decision that you have to make on June the 12th. If that's a concern for you, if the mismanagement of your tax dollars is a concern to you, then you need to pay very close attention to who you think is going to make the difference for you on June the 12th and make your vote count.
You know, that's not just an issue with the Pan Am Games, and I agree with you, I completely agree. It's obscene. It's an obscene amount of money, it's unnecessary. Get someone else to do the job for a third of the price. I mean, someone will, and they'll do a hell of a good job, right? And it's not just one person there either. There's a whole bunch of people that are working on that, and they all deserve to get paid a decent wage, but that's obscene. So, oh, there's a volunteer even. Pan Am Games. So, but I think this goes to a larger issue in our society. If you look at the CEO pay, or the hedge fund managers on Bay Street, they are getting paid incredible amounts of money. The ratio between the highest paid person and the lowest paid person in those organizations is 542 to 1. 30 years ago, it was about 30 to 1. Now that's reasonable, right? I mean, it's still a lot. It's a lot different, but it's not ridiculous. In the United States, which seems to be the way we're going in terms of this disparity of income between rich people and poor people, and the middle class is getting squeezed out completely. In the United States, it's 1,700 to 1. I mean, it's just obscene. And I think that's where the Liberals and Conservatives particularly, because it's all about the free market and private business, they say, well, if we're going to get those quality CEOs, then we got to pay them what they're used to getting in the private sector. And I just think that's BS. And it's time that we, as a society, said, what is fair and what are we going to put up with? And how much longer are we going to put up with this kind of abuse? Because it really is unfair. And we can make a difference by electing New Democrats. Because New Democrats don't agree with that growing disparity between rich and poor. We do not agree with that on any level.
When I listen to the party leaders on television, what I hear is Toronto, Toronto, Toronto. We hear about the infrastructure, we hear about the need for all kinds of things, and the fact that the taxpayer all across Ontario is going to get to pay for that. What are you going to take to the leaders of your parties that will get them to address rural issues on their platforms? I hear really very little about rural issues, and I don't know about you, but I have a lot of them. I compared a hydro bill from Toronto to a hydro bill here. The exact kilowatt hours, exact. The Toronto bill was 1/2 of the hydro bill down here. When I called Ontario Hydro about it, they could not explain to me the difference. So, can your party leaders address that? Why are we paying more? I don't know about you, but I drive a long way to distance. I can't afford to take a taxi. There are no buses. They have those options in Toronto. We don't have them. Why are we being asked to support the queen bee? I'm tired of feeling like the worker feeding a queen bee. Let's address all of Ontario. I want to hear that on television. How are you going to tell us we're not the workers, that they really give a darn about rural Ontario?
Thank you. It's a good question because it gives me an opportunity to let you know what's in our platform for rural Ontario. So, talk about infrastructure. Yes, we don't have subways in Brighton or Quinte West or Coburg, but we have roads and bridges. $14 billion over the next 10 years for rural infrastructure. $40 billion for the agricultural sector and food processing sector per year for the next 10 years, $400 million. I mentioned before the Eastern Ontario Development Fund to create jobs. I think that's rural Ontario. I contrast that with my NDP friends, and they forgot to put rural Ontario in their platform. There's nothing about agriculture.
Did you read the platform?
I did, yes.
Yeah, well, you missed that part.
So, but it's just fuzzy words. There's no numbers attached. So when you talk about rural Ontario, I think, is it enough? It's never enough. I think rural Ontario in the platform, which was the same as a budget, by the way, that the other two parties turned away, that turned their nose at, and one of them without even looking at it. So I think there's an enormous amount of recognition for rural Ontario on the platform. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and obviously rural Ontario is extremely important. 95% of our caucus comes from rural Ontario, so I'd like to think that we're one step ahead of the Liberals when it comes to addressing rural issues, and particularly Kemptville. I mean, we're hearing Mr. Rinaldi and the Liberals spew out 40 million, 14 million here, 140 million there, but no details attached specifically to projects or anything like that, although they can't even afford to give Kemptville College enough money to run the ag courses that are so desperately needed so that we have a rural Ontario. The horse racing industry, when you get me started on the devastation that the Liberals have done to the horse racing industry here in rural Ontario. Kawartha Downs went from 100 races last year, we're down to 20. Individuals that I know, I can cite 4 who actually have their homes up for sale or have sold their homes. They've had to euthanize over 9,000 horses. Agriculture is the second largest employer in Ontario. How are we going to work with our urban cousins? You're absolutely right. Why is rural Ontario picking up the tab for a lot of what is going on in other urban centers? I will push that message up to Mr. Hudak, and hopefully he will address that in the leaders' debate coming up on June 3rd. So thank you for the question.
We're green. Of course we care about rural Ontario. The farmland, the breadbasket of our society. has to be a greater understanding of how farms function, how they contribute to the municipalities, what kind of incentives we can bring farmers, how we can help them to create energy through solar cooperatives, processing facilities where they can bring their products to market. There are all kinds of initiatives that our leader, Mike Schreiner, who is in Guelph, a small businessman himself in the food industry, sees this as a huge component of the platform of the Greens. And just throwing numbers and things like that up into the air really doesn't encapsulate the whole need for dialogue, for bringing people on board who are involved with rural issues and putting a council together that will look at those needs, that will then go to the provincial representative, hopefully me, and try to mitigate some of those large issues that are holding back rural Ontarians, energy costs being primary among them.
Okay, so the leader of the provincial NDP is Andrew Horvath, and how would we, in rural areas, if we were elected in rural areas, champion the rural issues to the leader? That's what you're asking, right? I think she should maybe get into politics too. She had a lot of questions tonight. So I want to give you an example of something that happened in our community. In Campbellford, we had a public utility that was started by the farmers in Seymour Township 115 years ago. It was the first electric streetlight in a rural community in Ontario. That public utility operated for 100 years, and it had the lowest hydro rates in Ontario, 1.5 cents a kilowatt hour, delivered. No debt retirement charge, none of the rest of that crap that you can't understand on your bill, right? So, that was owned by the community. Not only were the power rates affordable for people, but there was dividends paid every year. So what happened in 1999? This great idea, privatize all the public utilities. That was a conservative idea. Privatize all the public utilities. Guess how much the lawyer from Bay Street got paid when that utility was sold for $8.2 million? He got paid $800,000. There's that magic number again. Yeah. I was at the public meeting and I said, why are you getting paid $800,000 to sell our public utility to a private company? We built that over 100 years. He said, oh, it's a complicated transaction and this is what we get paid. And I mean, he got paid $3,000 an hour or something. My point here is that for the NDP, we do believe in community ownership. We would not have supported a $400 million sweetheart deal with Samsung, for example, for renewable energy. Bad idea. The community should own these things, right? And they should be making the decisions whether they want wind turbines or not. It shouldn't be foisted on them from the provincial government. That should be a decision in the community, and the people in the community should own them. That's what needs to happen. Am I out of time?
He's going to ask 2 questions, and then we'll afford each of the speakers a chance to rebuttal.
Hello, my name is Linda Chamberlain. I'm not a public speaker, so please bear with me. My concern is Ontario health, in particular mental health. I know that our young people are dying by suicide, murders, stabbings, mass suicides that we've heard about this week. And I wonder what your parties are doing to make this awareness to mental health issues.
Linda, thanks for the question, and I know you experienced that firsthand, and I don't want to single you out, but I know that you're passionate about this, and we're sorry about that. Look, mental health, it's the hidden giant that we all think that, we're okay. But there's a lot of faces to mental health, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not a specialist, just experiences that people relate to me. I believe in the last 3 or 4 years, there's been an all-party committee dealing with, and to be fair, it was an all-party, and I think Christine had a chair, a member from Mr. Flaherty's, unfortunately passed away his wife. And I know I wasn't involved in it because I wasn't in government, but I did try to keep up a little bit with it. And it was a committee that tried to look into the depth of how government, not party, but how government should deal with the issue. Whoever forms government in 2 weeks' time, I think that should be a primary issue to deal with. Because you're right, there's too many people, and I mean, it's hidden.
We're on the edge.
It's hidden. And, and we see these atrocities happen. There are atrocities that are happening, and I think we could prevent them. Can we prevent them all? I'm not sure. But I think we could certainly do a better job. So I was so delighted that when an all-party committee was struck at Queen's Park, and I know they did. I talked to a couple of the members from the Liberal Party that took part in it, and I know that it was really moving for them. And I'm just hopeful that out of that report, whoever forms government, they really take it to heart. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Linda. And, absolutely, I've worked with Christine Elliott and listened to her because mental health issues, I've had my own personal experiences with individuals who are both in the teacher's capacity and also in the community and personal issues. And I think, Lou's right here, and it doesn't matter who forms government. We've all sort of agreed that there's a huge rise in mental health issues, and government needs to be more active in addressing the concerns of mental health, and it is a priority, and will be a priority, I'm certain, no matter who forms government.
Well, that's very encouraging to hear. And I think that one of the things that the Green Party has cooperated studies that show that there's a link between good health and good mental health. So a lot of the practitioners, the way that we deal with diagnosis and follow-up has to be a much more coordinated effort in terms of, not just looking at the person as they come into a clinic, but where are they going afterwards? What are they going to have for dinner? What are they doing in order to, make their situation more livable and more positive? Who is there to support them? So just by isolating them, and I think that in my experience with this issue, that feeling of isolation, that feeling of helplessness, I think needs to be mitigated by having our health system be a lot more coordinated with other areas of the patient's life, not just their visit to a clinic or to a doctor or to a psychologist or like the Clark Institute, that there's a whole spectrum of different supports that need to be coordinated. Caseworkers need to be fully invested in the patient, and that kind of commitment is something that the Green Party would make sure that we would have the practices in place to help those individuals.
to a lot of all candidates meetings over the years, like over 10 years, and this is the first time the question of mental health's come up at these all candidates meetings. And I think the number one thing we need to do is talk about it. We have to eliminate the stigma. Any of us could have depression. My mother has dementia. That's a mental health issue. What are we going to do with all these people who have dementia? I mean, we can't all afford to put them in private homes that are very expensive. So I think we need to talk about it. I think compassion is a really important part of that, but we also have to look at some of the root causes. And poverty is one of the root causes of mental health issues, and it goes back and forth too. Like, people that have mental health issues also have trouble keeping a job, for example, right? And making a living. So we need to find ways that are creative in our communities to support people, and we need the resources from the provincial and the federal governments to help provide that support. And there's a lot of amazing examples of great ideas and solutions out there now. It concerns me, the increasing level of these issues of depression and other teenage suicide, and look at our First Nations communities. Their rate of suicide is off the chart, and it's totally tragic. And I'm sure in some ways it's preventable. And we need to take it seriously. We need to talk about it. It is an issue for everyone in this room, and it's an issue for all the parties, and we have to work hard together on that to eliminate the stigma and actually get some real solutions happening on the ground.
So my question, I'm going to have to explain it a bit first because a lot of people here I know don't know what it is, because I work at a grocery store and I've been asked about it. A genetically modified organism is food that has been genetically modified, which means, has anyone ever heard of those apples that don't brown? So scientists in the lab have gone in and changed the genetics of this apple to make sure it doesn't do that. And so this is something that our bodies have a hard time with. So what is your guys' stance on whether or not GMO should continue to be allowed and kind of like, just be able to run rampant in Canada? Are you going to take the lead of Europe and say, no, this isn't okay for our bodies? Or are you going to just say, let's let that keep going?
Well, it's an excellent question, and thank you for being here tonight, because you just over our average quite a bit. And we need more of young people like you to come to this debate. And I didn't mean to offend any of us old folks. But we did have a high school debate, and the participation in the question was fantastic, so good for you to be here tonight. So I'm not an expert in genetically modified foods, but what I can tell you is Ontario is one of the leaders in having the best, safest food anywhere in the world. And we need to keep that standard up. When it comes to the genetic modified, I mean, I worry, because although some of those things that we inject to produce those products might be okay today, but somewhere down the road, we might find that maybe that wasn't a good thing to do, and we find that a lot with other things as well. So I think I don't have a straight answer for you, because I'm not an expert in the issue, and I just want to be honest about that. But it's certainly something that I think if there's that kind of concern, and obviously you brought that forward, I think that's something that all of us need to learn a little bit more about and go from there. So thank you for the question.
Yes, well, thank you very much, and again, to sort of echo Lou, it's great to see young people here. Nick, you work in the signs and everything, and thank you very much for coming out. Obviously, we all have concerns about the food we consume, and Ontario producers and the quality of food that we produce is bar none some of the best in the world. You're absolutely right. Europe and other jurisdictions have taken sort of leads on specific food items that you know, when our ag ministers go over and broker, negotiate deals with them, you know, that's a concern that they bring up. And you know, as the Asian market and the Southeast Asian markets open up, it's going to be market driven. If we're going to sell and export our produce and products to foreign countries, whether it's Europe or anywhere else in the world, those markets are going to be driven by what the consumers in those markets are going to buy. So I think, and our farmers are more than willing to adapt and have shown that they're very able to adapt to those requirements and produce the finest foods to export and also consume. So thank you very much.
So I just have to clarify, I'm not just talking about what Ontario's growing, because you know, we're pretty good, but we're importing things from the States and from Mexico. That's where the biggest problem is. So not just what we grow. I know what we grow is for the most part okay.
Were you at that No GMO festival in Toronto on the weekend? Oh, it was awesome. I went there as a representative of the Green Party, and truly blew my mind how many people are really, really concerned about it. And the most incredible thing, because you're young, was that the spokesperson for No GMO in this festival was a young girl, 15 years old, called Sarah Parent. And you can look her up online. She is the most incredible speaker, public speaker. I mean, there was music, there was, you know, the beekeepers were there, the neo, whatever that thing. So we just had a fantastic time. So there's a huge concern, not just from people in Northumberland, Quinte West, but people all across Ontario are very concerned about GMO and what kind of consequences there are. We know what some of those consequences are. For example, in canola oil and in corn oil that has been genetically modified, there are also sulfites. And in one of the research studies that I was reading, when they substituted the oil for butter, plain old butter, the incidence of asthma for the subjects disappeared. So that's telling you a huge, huge connection between the food that we eat and our health and disease. So the Greens absolutely would not endorse any GMOs.
I'd like to just give you a straight answer to your question. The Liberal Party and the Conservative Party both support GMOs and using GMOs in our food system. It's well documented. You can check it anywhere. I don't know why they don't answer the question, but that is the answer.
But it's economically reasonable to use GMOs.
Well, that they support the use of GMOs. What I'm saying is that the science, if you use a precautionary principle, the science around GMOs, there's a lot of concerns about the impacts of GMOs, and the reality is the dog wagging the tail, or is the tail wagging the dog? Who is really benefiting from the introduction of those? Because the large corporations like Monsanto, that's one of them, is really pushing these, and frankly, the Canadian Food Processing Association, the food processors, they don't want GMOs, and you know why they don't want GMOs? Because the consumers don't want them, because they're concerned about the health impacts of GMOs. So if this is a democratic country and we are listening to the people who are going to eat the food, then we should not have GMOs in this country. And honestly, we don't need them because we have very productive farms. We have excellent farming practices. We're improving those farming practices all the time. And there's no need for GMOs. Monsanto is the main beneficiary.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the questions. I'm going to ask us to start it. We're going to go opposite to the way we started when we began all this. Can we have a round of applause for good luck to you all in 2 weeks.
maybe staying out here. I am not Kiramis, but I think I've tried to represent the provincial NDP policies as straightforward and honestly as I can, and I've done the best that I can with that. Kira, I know her personally, I've known her for years. She's a wonderful human being. She really cares about this community. She's from this area, and she's got a young family, so a lot of the concerns, and she's in that sandwich generation where she's also taking care of an elderly mother, an older mother. And, you know, she really understands a lot of the concerns that you were talking about here tonight. So I am representing her, so I want to just say that about her, because it's really, she's the candidate, not me. I think that it's really time for change in Ontario. We've had 20 years of Conservative and Liberal governments in this province. And we're in the mess we're in partly because of the policies of those governments. We need some new ideas, we need some fresh people, we need to have some change, and I think the New Democratic Party, if you look at the policy and the platform, it's very practical, it's very reasonable, things that we can do right away and make them happen. We can cut the HST off hydro. We can continue to provide a $100 rebate for people on hydro. We want to look at gasoline prices. Other provinces have a monitor for retail gasoline prices. Why don't we have that? You know, these big oil companies get hundreds of billions in tax cuts over decades, right? They get a lot of tax cuts from our governments so that they can enrich their shareholders. How about some of that money flowing back to us through lower gas prices? Because honestly, it's hard in a rural community where there's no public transit to get around, and it's expensive. And I know lots of people try and carpool and make their trips smart, and I ride my bike to town every time I can. I live on a farm, but I try and ride my bike into town as much as possible. Not in the winter, but I do in the summer, in the spring and fall. So I think there's things that we can do, but the NDP, I really encourage you to look at the policies. They're really practical and doable. And I think that's one of the things about the NDP. It's a very pragmatic party, and it wants to make life better for the people in Ontario. That's really our fundamental objective.
Well, I'm really about sustainable communities. That is the reason that I'm here. I had the good fortune to have a wonderful community when I moved to Coburg. Judy Smith-Torrey, Ralph Torrey, Rich Thiessen, I could go on. And this group of wonderful individuals helped me to realize a lot of the ideas that I thought were important for communities. And we created organizations like Go Green Together, Sustainable Coburg, and we really tried to do good for the people of Coburg and in Port Hope as well. So out of that came a natural inclination out of the concerns that I had to move into the green domain. And I am here today simply because of the encouragement of those wonderful people and seeing the success of having a vision, a green vision, seeing how receptive people are, especially young people, who really understand about water conservation. They understand that they have to live in that world in the future. They understand how important food is. They want to get their hands dirty. They want to be part of that experience of shaping and forming, whether they become farmers or become teachers. There's a real commitment to making the future of the world a green one. And it's been very, very exciting. And I hope it does become a green one.
Well, again, I just want to thank everyone for coming out this evening. There's been a great exchange of ideas and opinions and where each party and individual stands on a number of issues. And I want to thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be engaged and to listen to what we all have to say. June 12th is going to be history in the province of Ontario. There is clearly two paths that you can choose to go down on June 12th. You can continue to go down the path toward ruin, higher debt, or we can go down a path, hopefully, we can get more jobs, affordable energy here in the province of Ontario, and turn things around. You know, leadership is about making the hard decisions. That's what true leadership is. My mother always told me that no was the easiest word in the English language to say. But what we've had in the last 12 years almost under the current Liberal government is a government who cannot say no. They are trying to spend their way to prosperity, and it's not working. What has taken 23 premiers, 140 plus years, to amass a provincial debt of $130 billion, the Liberal government under Premier Wynne and Mr. McGuinty have doubled that, more than doubled that. So, tough decisions have to be made. We have over 400 bureaucrats that have been hired since 2009. There is a lot of agencies, boards, and commissions that are not working for the value that you as taxpayers expect. We have seen waste in this Liberal government to new heights. The Green Energy Act has killed over 300,000 jobs in the province of Ontario. They have spent over $20 billion on the Green Energy Act that produces less than 3% of the energy produced here in the province of Ontario. The debt is gone to, we're spending almost $11 billion on interest payments alone. So, in the time that we've been here, as I mentioned earlier, $33,000 a minute. In the 3 hours that I've been here, that's 540 ECEs that could have been kept in our classrooms, or 270 nurses on the front lines to ensure that our seniors get the quality of care that they deserve. On June 12th, I ask for your humble vote in sending me back to Queen's Park to continue the good work that we need to get done. Thank you very much.
First of all, to the Chamber and Legion for hosting this event, thank you. You've come a long way. As president of the Chamber of Commerce, one of the founders, our very first all-candidates debate was the 1995 election. I remember Joan Fawcett and Doug Galt. We had, and I don't know about the other parties, but we had a Douglas, and I think 10 people attended. So we've come a long way. Keep up the good work. Look, like I say, there is some things that we do agree, and one is that this election is very, very important. It's worth repeating. I just want to touch on the question from the lady that had a lot of questions, and I'm sorry I don't remember your name. You asked what specifically we were going to do as a party for rural Ontario. You know, Mr. Milligan said he's going to talk to Tim, and that was his answer at the end of a big, long word. He was going to. Russ, he had an opportunity when he criticized me for saying he didn't have a plan. He didn't say anything. I mean, I think the NDP only claimed to fame to this election is they caused an election over $100 million for an election that we didn't need. So, and
You
I
deserve to get booted out, that's why.
So, I think going back to why I think it's an important election. I say to you, my good friend would say that the Green Energy Act was a disaster. Well, it created 31,000 jobs. It's improved the life of people. You can go to Sick Kids Hospital, and since COVID almost completely gone, there's less kids with asthma today in the province than we ever had before. So, you know, to me, that's an investment in our society. We talk about education a little bit tonight. We have one of the best education systems in the world. I stand by it. Can we make it better? Absolutely, and we're prepared to do that. You have a choice on June the 12th, and I got that date right this time. So you can vote for my friends of the PCs, And what's going to happen? 100,000 jobs are going to be gone. And you can spend that whatever way you want it. It's 100,000 jobs. And I see there's a few seniors here tonight, and I know we're still all pretty able, that's why you're here tonight. But if it comes a time when you want to do some work in your house, so that you stay in your house and improvement to help you stay at home when you're not all that well, that $1,500 renovation credit for seniors, it's gone. I see some young students here, some young people here tonight, and it's great. If you're in university or you're going to university next year, if you vote Conservative, the 30% reduction is gone. I mean, and I'm not picking this up, it's black and white in the platform. So, on June 12th, I humbly ask you for your support. I was there for 8 years, and I want to go back there to continue the work that I was doing and make it even better. Thank you very much for being here.